What's your favorite skit? Hello? Hello? Oh, and spoilers. Welcome to the channel, I'm Hayes, I'll talk movies all day, so subscribe right now if you want to be entertained. And today, I want to talk about Scream 2, the 1997 sequel to the hit Janet and Michael Jackson song. And yes, I have used that joke before, and yes, I'll probably use it again. Anyway, how this works is I'm going to go through the movie, point out all the reasons I can find as to why it's trash, and then at the end, drop a few final thoughts. So the movie starts off with a couple going to the cinema, and I guess they're continuing what they started with the first film by opening up with famous actors. This time, it's Omar Epps and Jada.
Keep my wife's name out your fucking mouth!
Sorry. It's Omar Epps and Miss. You know what? Let's just move on. So anyway, Maureen says Sandra Bullock is playing down the street, and Phil replies, "I wouldn't want to pay $7.50 to see some Sandra Bullock shit." First of all, ticket prices were so cheap back then. Not anymore, man. Not anymore. And B, this movie was released in 1997, but it's actually set in 1998, 2 years after the first film. Now, in 1998, Sandra Bullock had 3 movies out in the cinema, and of those 3 movies, only one of them could be considered a commercial flop. So, all in all, Sandra Bullock actually had a pretty good year in 1998, which means when Phil said, "Nobody want to pay $7.50 to see some Sandra Bullock shit,"
that was a fucking lie.
Well, no, all I'm saying is that the horror genre is historical for excluding the African American element.
So I've heard quite a few people say something similar over the years, but that's not exactly true. Now look, I ain't saying it's been perfect or nothing, but all things considered, the horror genre has actually been pretty good to black people. Plus this film is directed by Wes Craven, who co-wrote A Nightmare on Elm Street 3, which didn't exclude African Americans, and Maureen is played by played by this actress who was in Tales from the Crypt, Demon Knights, which also didn't exclude African Americans. I'm just saying, they should have known better.
Stab souvenirs, the studio sent them. And it's white.
It's actually black, just has a white face, you know, the type of thing that makes you wanna scream. Anyway, they're showing a movie based on a killer who wore a mask and decided to give out that same mask to everyone at the cinema. Gee, what can possibly go wrong?
Can I have a medium popcorn, no butter?
No butter? What kind of self-hating weirdo eats popcorn with no butter? Are you mad? Matter of fact, you know what? This Maureen character is just annoying. She got free tickets to a movie and complained about it on the way in, made race-baiting comments, shouts her non-asked for opinion out for everyone to hear, and makes Phil pay for her food after he got them the tickets in the first place, even though she has her own money anyway. Man, I wonder who they based her on. So was Ghostface playing contingent on somebody being so curious about a mumbling noise in the next cubicle that they'd press their head up against the cubicle divider? This guy just gets lucky, doesn't he? I mean, who would ever put their whole head up against a toilet cubicle divider? Nah, that's not happening, especially from a guy who doesn't even close the door behind him. Furthermore, did Phil even pee? Because it looks like he got his willy out, then got distracted, but didn't actually pee. I'm not sure he even put his willy back in. So, you're telling me that Phil was so intrigued by some mumbling that he decided to not relieve himself and instead turn all the way around, potentially with his willy still hanging out, and lean his head up against the toilet cubicle divider? Also, how did Ghostface know his head was against the divider? Did he just guess? To be fair, I can totally believe Maureen is exactly the type of person to get stabbed and then go to the front of the theater to draw as much attention to herself as possible because it's all about me. Flippin' hell, man, get out the way. Ain't nobody trying to hear you right now. Anyway, the main part of the movie starts and lets us know that Sidney Prescott is now in college getting prank called by Corey Gillis. Here's the thing though, caller ID was introduced in 1988. The ability to block your number from showing up on a caller ID was introduced in the early 90s. This movie is set in 1998. Corey Gillis should have known better. Also, I like how this movie opened with two black people getting kills to make a self-aware point about black representation, and then in the next scene, we get introduced to the black best friend. The only thing that could have made this better is if Hallie was fat and or gay. Oh, and said things like, girlfriend. So this girl came running from somewhere over there, stopped to tell Hallie and Sydney to check out the news, then kept running in the same direction. Does that seem odd to you? Because that seems odd to me. I mean, presumably she was watching the news from where she came running from, so why not run back to where she knows the news is still playing? Also, Hallie and Sydney were watching the Cotton Wary interview, so who changed the channel? Or did the TV just change itself right when some random girl tells them to check out the news, and it just so happens to be the part that is most pertinent to the plot?
You could say what happened in that theater is a direct result of the movie itself.
Okay, so I get that this is a film theory class, but using the recent deaths of two students seems really insensitive. I mean, these guys were probably friends with the victims. Well, they were probably friends with Phil. Maureen, maybe not so much. But their fellow college mate, their friend, and just all-round generally well-liked guy, Phil, was brutally killed the night before, and this professor thought it was a good idea to use it in a film theory discussion. That's heartless, bro. So in the first movie, Billy Loomis was introduced by climbing through a window. In this movie, Derek is introduced climbing over a wall. So is this going to be a thing with Sydney's boyfriends? None of them know how to use the facilities in an appropriate manner?
The Delta Lambdas are the biggest bunch of fucking...
Hey!
To be fair, so far we know very little about the Delta Lambdas, but even still, I think I agree with Mickey. Is Dewey there as a cop? Because if he is, then why wasn't he at the press conference? Or is he there in a personal capacity? And if that's the case, why was he allowed on campus? A college where two students just got murdered, they're gonna let anybody walk in unannounced and unattended? Nah, if anyone survives this movie, it's a lie.
You probably already know. Or her. Or them.
Actually, that's a pretty accurate prediction of the future. After everything that's happened, why is Cece giving out details to some random stranger that called up out the blue? Also, two students got killed the previous night. Shouldn't college party events be cancelled? Furthermore, Cece thought she was alone in the house, which, by the way, bad idea to leave anyone alone when two students just got murdered last night. But turns out she wasn't alone because Dawnie, interesting name, was also there. So when Cece realized she wasn't alone, why not stay with Dawnie? Wherever Dawnie goes, you go. Don't matter how awkward it gets. Surely that's a better option than staying alone in a house while some weirdo calls you. Also, was Ghostface playing contingent on Cece stepping outside then going back inside and not closing the door? This guy really does just get lucky, doesn't he? Cece did not watch Scream 1. You know, I wouldn't worry too much. They'll probably just bring her back to life again by the end of the first episode of the next season.
Empire Strikes Back. It's a better story, improved effects.
Not a sequel, part of a trilogy completely planned.
Please, Star Wars had no planning. Also, even though it's part of a trilogy, it is still a sequel, since sequel means it follows on from something previous. You know, like in a sequence. You'd think a film student would know that. So was Ghostface playing contingent on Sydney going into the house by herself and not shutting the door? This guy really does just get lucky, doesn't he?
I'm gonna go get a quick cup of coffee. You want?
A quick cup of coffee? Are you mad?
Why would anyone go back in that house anyway?
Why would you give away that you're the killer in the first half of the movie? I mean, I get they're trying to do something different here, but really? Now all Sydney gotta do is let the police know so they can keep an eye on Mickey and eventually catch him in the attempt. Matter of fact, while they're at it, they can arrest Hallie too for that quick cup of coffee comment. This movie should have been like 50 minutes. Max. So you mean the 3 kills so far were specifically targeted? Ghostface knew specifically when Phil was gonna go to the toilet, which toilet in the theater Phil was gonna go to, and the fact there'd be other people at the urinal so he'd have to use the cubicle. Also, Ghostface knew specifically that somebody with the name Maureen and somebody with the name Stevens would go to the same college as Sydney and start dating. Also, Ghostface knew specifically that nobody likes Maureen, which, you know, fair. And also, Ghostface knew specifically that Cece was going to be alone in the house, even though Cece herself didn't know she was going to be alone in the house, and leave the door open. Ghostface knew all that specifically, yet still can't just stab Sydney. Like, what in the 5-movie deal kind of nonsense is this? You see, that's exactly the type of thing a killer would say. In fact, Billy said something similar in the first movie. Now, from the way they introduced Derek to Derek getting cut but nowhere vital to this, they're trying way too hard to make it look like Derek is the killer. Well, the second killer since Mickey already dropped the ball. But the point is, that just means it's not Derek. To be honest, at this point, I would have guessed that the second killer is Randy. You know, he's kind of sort of friends-ish with Mickey. They're both obsessed with films, and Randy has been one-hand golfing over Sydney since 1996, and you know that simp to incel pipeline is unmatched. You know, I'm just realizing there are lots of popular 90s TV shows being represented in this movie. Tori Spelling was in Beverly Hills 90210, Courtney Cox was in Friends, Nev Campbell was in Posse of 5, Elise Neal was in Sequest DSV, Laurie Metcalf was in Roseanne, Jerry O'Connell was in Sliders, Sarah Michelle Gellar was in Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Omar Epps was in ER, She Who Shall Not Be Named was in A Different World, and Dwayne Martin had 1 or 2 appearances in multiple shows like Happily Ever After, The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, and Living Single. Just something that I noticed, it really doesn't matter. But anyway, this Stab movie is based on a book that Gail Weathers wrote, but Gail Weathers wasn't there when this scene took place, so how would she know about it? Because they kind of give the impression that Gail and Sydney weren't talking much in between movies, and Billy's dead, so... Matter of fact, speaking of the Stab movie, it starts off with a reenactment of the first scene from Scream 1. But since the movie is based on the book by Gail Weathers, that makes no sense for an opening scene, since Gail Weathers' whole thing was about trying to prove Cotton Weary's innocence. This bit would be somewhere in the middle, if even in it at all. But to be fair, some filmmakers do start their films off with middle or ending scenes. That could be what happened. I'm just saying, of the 2 reenacted scenes they've shown so far, Gail wasn't around for either of them, and yet somehow manages to write a near exact account of both events. Something in the buttermilk ain't clean. Considering how quickly Kenny got replaced in the first movie, I'm thinking Joel is indeed very expendable, and Gail is just lying right now. Also, Gail has been rude to Joel so far. Matter of fact, she was pretty rude to Kenny too. Matter of fact, she's just been rude anyway. I think I'm gonna need Missy Elliott on this one. She's a bitch. You know, I was thinking this guy should be fired for knowingly putting a student's life in danger for the sake of a play. But considering the college is still allowing the play to go on even after 3 students have been murdered and there's a clear threat to the lead of the show, the only place worse than this is that school in 13 Reasons Why.
And I'll be back when you guys start talking about something a little more saved by the bellish, all right?
Another popular 90s TV show getting represented.
White male suspect, 9 o'clock.
That's the second time Dewey said something like that. This movie is racist towards white people. Also, how are they running around grabbing people's phones and no one punched them in the face? Furthermore, this is 1998. I swear most college students would have been too poor to have a mobile phone back then. And they found 4 in just one section of the college? In Ohio? Nah, what is this, a fantasy film? And was Ghostface's plan contingent on somebody with a mobile phone walking past the van so Randy could run over to check if it was the killer and stay by the van while he waits for Randy to turn around? This guy really does just get lucky, doesn't he? So Cotton Weary is just wandering around a college unattended where 4 students have just been murdered, plus these 2 guys who are supposed to be protecting Sydney just happen to leave her alone at the exact opportune moment for Cotton to approach her? Actually, this place might be on par with the school in 13 Reasons Why. To be fair, I guess they're trying to suggest that Cotton, Joel, or even Derek could be the killer. Well, second killer. Mickey already dropped the ball. But they all just happen to be or not be in the right place at the wrong times. So unless there's actually 4 killers, this movie's gonna have a lot of explaining to do. Hold up, that was a public library? You sure? Because that very much looks like it's on a college campus. Why would it be open to the public? Furthermore, why would a public library, or indeed any library, allow any computer to send messages on the network without the need to be signed in? I mean, how did Sidney Prescott survive Woodsboro just to go college in the least secure place? Okay, so now they're gonna take us somewhere safe. Because, you know, it's not like that's what they were there for. Was Ghostface's plan contingent on Dewey and Gail going to the college auditorium to watch video footage instead of going to the hotel they're presumably staying at? This guy really does just get lucky, doesn't he? Dewey's dead now, right? I mean, if Dewey survives this, next movie he better be in a wheelchair or have bionic legs or something. I get that he's just trying to lighten the mood, but considering 4 students have just been murdered, including Sydney's very own close personal simp, and Sydney as a known target, maybe don't say that joke. At this point, I'm thinking Ghostface is someone in the police or has a police contact. Either that, or was Ghostface playing contingent on the police driving Sydney right by wherever they are at the moment? To be fair, it looks like they're still on campus, but if they're at a traffic light, then they would be near the campus exit, and it's probably not hard to figure out they're gonna have to drive through the exit in order to leave the college. But even still, Ghostface would either have to know when they were leaving and go get ready ahead of time, or be at the college dorm, watch them leave and then run after the car hoping it would get stopped at the traffic lights. Or after seeing Sydney leave with the cops, call the other Ghostface and tell him to head him off at the lights, which would heavily suggest that Derek is one of the killers. Either that or the other Ghostface is still inside the dorm, or somebody unknowingly calls the killer to innocently tell them where they were going. And if that's the case, man, this guy really does just get lucky, doesn't he? So in the 10 to 15 seconds that Sydney had her head turned and Hallie was potentially just not looking at the car, Ghostface manages to unjam the car door, escape without making a noise or being spotted, and turn up behind Hallie, who is at least 20 meters away. To be fair, the Ghostface that turned up behind Hallie could have been Ghostface number 2, but Ghostface number 1 would still have had to escape the car without drawing attention to himself, and everything we've seen of Ghostface so far shows that's an extremely unlikely possibility. So is Ghostface playing contingent on Sydney going to the theatre to seek help from a guy who's already shown he's more interested in putting on the show than student welfare, instead of going to, you know, someone who can actually help? This guy really does. Nah, I ain't even gonna say it. Oh wow, Mickey is the killer. I totally didn't see that coming. For real though, this whole time nobody suspected Mickey?
Who else do we got?
There's
Mickey, the freaky Tarantino film student.
Okay, fair enough. Randy deserved better.
Billy was a sick fuck who tried to get away with it. Mickey is a sick fuck who wants to get caught.
Don't these guys ever learn? Just shoot the girl. Ain't nobody trying to hear your whole dumbass plan right now. Hold up. So Mrs. Loomis has been wandering around this college for nearly an hour and 40 minutes, and at no point Sydney saw her until just now, even after they found Cece's body. Just didn't see her. Or what about Dewey, police officer from the same town? It's not unthinkable that he would know Billy's mother, but apparently he was standing right next to her and nothing? Really? Not saying it. Not saying it. You know, in 2023, there were 3,204 serial killers in the United States. So when Mrs. Loomis said only 97, did you guys take that as a challenge? Also, if Mickey was on a secret serial killer website, does that mean he's killed before? Or was he just curious? In any case, surely the FBI know about this website as well, and then all they have to do is monitor its usage. This movie should have been like 20 minutes, max.
Everything's traceable back to Mickey, including the cop gun he used to kill everybody. But let's just suppose that you...
Seriously? They're really gonna do this twice in one movie? Man, what are the odds that the person Sydney accused of killing her mother just happened to be very proficient with a gun? Cause that's not an easy shot to make, considering most of Mrs. Loomis was behind Sydney, possibly even including the parts of her body where the bullet actually hit. Man, what are the odds? Also, Mrs. Loomis had that knife right up to Sydney's neck, so when she got shot and fell, Sydney died in this scene. So the movie ends with Mickey trying and failing one last scare and Sydney making sure that Mrs. Loomis is dead. Also turns out Dewey is still alive, even though at this point he really shouldn't be. And Joel, the one black guy to survive this movie, is back. I can't wait to see how they develop his character in the next film. Alright, so before I get into my final thoughts, if you liked this movie, check out these movies. They're all sequels that, in my opinion, were better than the original film in terms of storytelling, character development, plot, pacing, etc, etc, etc. Randy was wrong about this one. Okay, so let's talk about Scream 2. Now, the first Scream movie did some really clever things by taking existing horror tropes and using them to subvert expectations, and by and large it works pretty well. Because of that, going into the sequel, part of me is watching it like it's a murder mystery, trying to figure out who the killer is and looking out for any clues. But the thing is, it's not a murder mystery, and it's not really trying to be. For one thing, it doesn't really give you any clues. Well, apart from when Mickey asks why would Derek go back in the house, but let me not tell too many lies, I did not spot that one right away. You see, Mickey asks why Derek would go back in the house, but he already knows, or at least should already know, why Derek would go back in the house. Because he loves her. But serial killers often lack empathy, so the idea of risking your life for somebody you love seems ridiculous, thus asking the question, why would Derek go back in the house? But anyway, it doesn't really give much clues, but it does heavily hint at various characters, and then by the end, it's probably not who you was thinking, which is pretty much what the first movie did. So now the question becomes, well, what makes this film different? And the answer is, Randy pretty much says it. Bigger body count and more blood and gore. Now, describing it that way kinda makes it sound like not much more than a cash grab. But honestly, in my opinion, Scream 2 is actually a pretty solid, worthwhile film. One of the problems that a lot of sequels face is a justification of its own existence beyond the obvious trying to make more money for the studio. Scream 2 doesn't really have that problem, because from the first movie, it was always about being self-aware while poking fun at tropes of the horror genre. Now, that's not to say it wasn't a cash grab. I think the fact that it was released less than a year after the first movie kind of speaks to that. And perhaps that's also where some of the problems come in. Maybe with a little more time they could have made something that didn't have nearly every scene take place in the same general location. Also, it doesn't seem to hold up well that all these kids from the same college were getting murdered in a short amount of time, and apart from the main cast, no one else's life seems to have changed. They still just wander around the campus, going to class, going to parties as normal, as if there isn't a masked killer on the loose. Also, maybe if they had more time, they wouldn't have to rely so much on Ghostface kills being so convenient. And yeah, I know the first movie used a lot of convenience too, so actually, I guess even if they had more time, they probably would have done the same thing. But anyway, personally, I feel like it would have been nice if the kills took some real planning rather than Ghostface just getting lucky all the time. Like, what would have happened if the college shut down and made everyone stay in their dorms under police supervision? How would Ghostface kill the specific people he wanted to kill without exposing himself? But here's the thing, Scream 2 doesn't have to do any of that. Because of its self-aware nature, all they really had to do was make a film that might make you laugh a little bit, maybe make you think a little bit, while above all make you go, damn, that was nuts. And yeah, they did that. And they did that well. So that's what I think of Scream 2. What do you think of Scream 2? Let me know down below. And while you're there, be sure to like, subscribe, and drop a suggestion if you don't mind.